I first met Dawson on a cold Thursday afternoon. My name is Michelle, and at that time I was 31 and living in a small apartment in London. I had a busy job in marketing, and life in the city was expensive. When my old roommate left, I needed someone new to share the rent. So I posted an advertisement online. A week later, a man named Dawson came to see the apartment. He was not what I expected. Most people who came before him talked too much or tried too hard to be friendly. Dawson was different. He was quiet and polite. He told me he had just moved from a small town because he found a new job in London. His voice was calm, and his eyes were soft. When he spoke, he looked down a lot, like he was careful with every word. He said he did not talk much, and I believed him. There was something about him that felt safe. I showed him the rooms and the kitchen, and he asked very few questions. He said he liked it and could move in the next day. It felt fast, but something told me to say yes. So the next day, Dawson moved in with 2 small suitcases and a box of books. He was not the kind of man who brought noise or drama into a place. In the first weeks, I did not know much about him. My work kept me busy, and my nights were often long. Sometimes I came home late from the office, and Dawson would be sitting quietly in the kitchen, reading or cooking. He often cooked dinner for both of us. I never asked him to, but he always made enough for 2. His food was simple but warm, and I started to enjoy eating with him more than going out. He seemed lonely, though. He never went out, never talked about friends, and never mentioned anyone close to him. I sometimes wondered if he had ever been in love. There was something almost innocent about him. He always looked at people as if he was still learning how the world worked. One Friday evening, I came home later than usual. I had been crying. My ex-boyfriend and I had argued again, and my heart felt heavy. When I opened the door, Dawson was standing in the living room, holding a cup of tea. His face was calm as always. He asked softly if I was okay. I said yes, but my voice was weak. He did not say more. He just stood there quietly, waiting for me to speak if I wanted to. That silence felt more comforting than any words. I do not know what happened next exactly. I only remember that I walked closer to him. He smelled like soap and something warm. My eyes met his, and I asked him if he had ever been close to anyone before. His face turned red, and for a moment he froze. Then he said, "No." His answer surprised me, but it also touched something inside me. That night, we crossed a line we had never talked about before. He was nervous, and I could see that he did not know what to do. I guided him gently. Everything felt quiet and careful. For the first time in a long time, I felt wanted in a pure way. Afterward, he asked me if he had done everything right. I told him he was perfect. His smile then was small and shy, but it was real. For a moment, I thought something beautiful had begun. The next morning, I woke up and saw sunlight on the wall. I turned to his side of the bed, but it was empty. I thought he was in the kitchen, maybe making coffee, but when I went out, the flat was silent. His door was open. The bed was cold, and his things were gone. I checked the bathroom, the kitchen, and even the small balcony, but he was nowhere. His phone was off. At first, I told myself he must have gone somewhere quickly, but hours passed, and he did not come back. Then days passed. I could not understand why he had left without saying goodbye. I felt used and confused. He had been so gentle, so kind. It made no sense. My heart ached, and I could not focus at work. His absence was loud. 1 week later, my phone vibrated on the table. My heart jumped when I saw his name. The message was short. "I'm sorry, Michelle. I had to go home. I didn't mean to hurt you." I read it again and again, but it did not help. What did he mean by had to? Why couldn't he tell me before he left? I felt angry and sad at the same time. The word home stayed in my mind. I remembered he had told me once that he was from a small town about 2 hours from London. I searched online for that town, bought a train ticket, and left the same day. I told myself I only wanted answers. When I arrived, the air smelled clean, like rain and wood. His house was easy to find because it was one of the few with a white fence and tall trees. I walked up the path and knocked on the door. An older woman opened it. She had gray hair tied back and tired eyes. Before I could say anything, she said, "You must be Michelle." I froze. My name on her lips felt strange. "Yes," I said carefully. She sighed. "You shouldn't have come here," she said quietly. My stomach felt cold, but she opened the door wider and told me to come in. The house smelled of old books and tea. The woman led me to the living room and told me to sit. She looked at me for a long moment before she spoke again. "I'm Dawson's mother," she said. "He told me about you." I waited for her to continue, afraid of what she might say. Her voice was soft but serious when she began. "Dawson's father died a few years ago," she said. "Before he died, Dawson made him a promise. He promised he would stay pure until marriage. He promised to wait for his wife, whoever she would be." She stopped for a moment, then looked directly into my eyes. "But Dawson broke that promise with you. He felt terrible about it. He thought he had failed his father. That is why he left so suddenly." Her words hit me hard. I did not know what to say. I felt shame and sadness, but also confusion. I had not known any of this. Dawson had never spoken about his father or that promise. I wanted to tell her that I had never meant to make him feel guilty, that I had cared for him, but my mouth would not move. I just sat there, staring at the floor. When I left her house, the sky was turning dark. I walked to the station slowly, feeling heavy. On the train back to London, I looked out at the fields passing by and thought about Dawson. I wondered if I would ever see him again. Part of me hoped he would return. Another part knew I had to let him go. For weeks, I lived with that emptiness. I worked, I ate, I slept, but I felt like I was only pretending to live. Sometimes I dreamed of him. Sometimes I hated him. but mostly, I missed him. Before I continue with the story, please like, subscribe, share, and let me know in the comments where you are listening from. Your support means a lot. Now, let's continue. 3 months passed before I saw him again. By then, I had stopped hoping. I tried to fill my days with work and small things that made me busy. I went for walks, watched movies, and met a few friends, but nothing felt the same. I often found myself thinking about him when I cooked or when I saw someone reading alone in a cafe. Dawson had left a space that no one else could fill. Then, one morning, there was a knock on my door. It was early, and I was still in my pajamas. I opened the door, and there he was. Dawson stood there with a small suitcase in his hand. His face looked thinner, and his eyes were tired. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. He said quietly, "I needed time to think, but I could not forget you, Michelle." I did not know what to say. I wanted to cry, but instead I just nodded and let him come inside. The silence between us was heavy, but it was not angry. It was full of things we both wanted to say but could not yet. We sat on the couch, and he looked at me with sad eyes. He told me that after he left, he had felt lost. He thought he had done something wrong by being with me. He said his father's promise was something he took very seriously. For many weeks, he believed that breaking it meant he was no longer a good man. But time away from me had changed him. He had realized that love was not about rules or promises made out of fear. He said he learned that real love could be imperfect and still be true. When he said that, I felt my throat tighten. His words were soft, but I could hear the truth in them. He said he had missed me every day. He had tried to move on, but every small thing reminded him of me. The smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of rain on the window, the books we used to talk about. Everything brought him back to me. Tears filled my eyes. I reached for his hand, and he smiled for the first time since he arrived. In that moment, I knew that no matter what had happened, I wanted him back in my life. I did not care about his father's promise or the time he had been away. I just wanted to start again. In the weeks that followed, Dawson moved back into the apartment. It felt strange at first, like we were learning to live together all over again. But slowly, the old comfort returned. He cooked dinner again, and I started leaving small notes for him in the kitchen before work. He was still quiet, but now he spoke more about his feelings. Sometimes, late at night, he told me stories about his childhood and his father. I listened and tried to understand how deep that old promise had gone into his heart. For a while, life felt peaceful, but peace never stays for long. Soon people began to notice that Dawson and I were together. Someone at my office had seen us in a cafe, and by the next week, everyone seemed to be talking about it. I worked in a company where gossip spread fast. People whispered things behind my back. Some said I was taking advantage of him because he was quiet and shy. Others said I had broken him. At first I tried to ignore it, but the words started to hurt. Every time I heard someone laugh in the break room, I thought they were laughing at me. My boss asked me one day if everything was okay at home, and I felt small and embarrassed. I did not know how to explain something so personal. When I told Dawson about it, he looked angry for the first time. He said he wanted to go to my office and tell everyone to stop, but I told him not to. I said it would only make things worse. I told him it did not matter what they said, but deep down, it did matter. Every cruel word stayed with me. At night, I sometimes cried after he fell asleep. I did not want him to see how much it was hurting me. I started thinking that maybe it would be better if we were apart. Maybe the rumors would stop, and he would not have to feel the shame people tried to give him. One evening, I sat with him at the table and said softly, "Maybe we should take some time apart." He looked shocked. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He asked why, and I tried to explain, but my voice shook. I told him that I did not want his name to be hurt because of me. He listened quietly and then put his fork down. "Michelle," he said, "I am not ashamed of you. I never was. You did not make me weak. You made me human. I love you, and I am not going to lose you again because of what other people think." His words broke the wall I had built inside me. I cried, and he held me. He told me that he had already lost me once, and that he would not make the same mistake again. His voice was calm but full of feeling. In that moment, I realized that his love was stronger than my fear. From that day, we stopped trying to hide. We went out together, and we did not care who saw us. Slowly, the gossip began to fade because people always find new stories to talk about. But what never faded was the quiet bond between us. It felt like we had both walked through a storm and come out on the other side, holding hands. 2 years later, we made a big change. We left the city and moved to a small town by the sea. Dawson found a job teaching history at a local college. He was good at it, and he seemed happier than I had ever seen him. He said the sea helped him think clearly. I believed him. He spent many evenings walking along the shore, watching the waves. I opened a small jewelry shop in the town. It was something I had always wanted to do but never had time for in London. I made handmade pieces and sold them to tourists. Sometimes Dawson came to the shop to bring me lunch. He always smiled when he saw me talking to customers. We started to build a quiet, simple life, one without loud parties or late nights. At first, I missed the noise of the city, but soon I began to enjoy the sound of the sea and the slow rhythm of our days. Dawson still blushed when I mentioned our first night together. That part of him never changed. I found it sweet now. It reminded me of how careful and honest he had been that night, even when everything was new to him. Sometimes, when we sat in the garden after dinner, Dawson told me that he still thought about his father's promise. But he said he no longer felt guilty. He said he believed his father would understand that love is not about rules. It is about kindness, patience, and forgiveness. I agreed. Our life had not been easy, but it was real. In the end, Dawson taught me something too. He showed me that love is not about never making mistakes. It is about staying when things get hard, about learning and growing together. He regretted everything he had done to hurt me, but he never ran again. And that was enough. Our life in the small town was peaceful for a long time. I woke up early every morning and opened my jewelry shop by 9. Dawson left for the college soon after. We had breakfast together before he went. He always kissed my forehead and said he would see me in the evening. I used to watch him walk down the street through the shop window. His bag was always over his shoulder, and his steps were calm. There was something about him that made me feel safe. People in the town were kind. They did not ask many questions about where we came from or what kind of life we had before. They were simple people who cared more about small things like weather, work, and family. For the first time, I felt like we belonged somewhere. I had friends who visited my shop often. They liked my designs and told their families about them. Some of them even asked Dawson to make short history talks for their children. He enjoyed it. His students liked him too because he spoke gently and never made them feel small. Sometimes, in the evenings, we sat in our garden with cups of tea. The air smelled of the sea, and the sound of the waves reached us softly. We often sat in silence, but it was a good kind of silence. It was full of peace and understanding. I sometimes looked at him and thought about how much he had changed since that first day in London. The shy man who used to hide behind his quiet voice had become strong and sure. But even in peaceful lives, small cracks appear. Dawson's job started to take more of his time. There were exams to check, meetings to attend, and new lessons to plan. He came home tired and sometimes late. I told him it was okay, but I missed our evenings together. I began to spend more time alone in the shop, working on new jewelry pieces and listening to the radio. The town was calm, but inside, I felt the old fear of being forgotten again. One evening, after closing the shop, I walked to the beach. The sun was setting, and the sky was full of pink and gold colors. I sat on a rock and watched the waves move back and forth. A couple walked by holding hands, and I suddenly thought about the night Dawson left me in London. I remembered the same feeling in my stomach, the fear of being left behind. I told myself not to think like that. He had changed. He would not leave again. Still, a small part of me was afraid. When I returned home, Dawson was sitting at the table with a pile of papers. He looked up and smiled, but I could see that he was tired. I asked him if he wanted tea, and he said yes. We sat together quietly for a few minutes. Then he said, "I think I need to visit my mother soon. She has been asking about us." I nodded. It had been more than 2 years since I met his mother, and I wondered if she still thought about that old promise. A week later, he packed a small bag and took the train to his hometown. He said he would only stay 2 nights. When he left, the house felt too quiet. I kept myself busy at work, but I checked my phone often. He sent short messages in the evenings. "All good here. Mom sends her love. Coming back tomorrow. They were short but enough. On the third evening, he returned, looking calm. We had dinner together, and he told me that his mother was fine. He said she had finally accepted that life was different now. She told him that his father would have been proud of the man he had become. When he said that, his eyes filled with emotion. I reached across the table and touched his hand. I could see that the visit had given him peace. That night, we went for a walk along the beach. The moonlight touched the water, and the sea was soft and dark. He stopped and turned to me. "I am sorry for everything, Michelle," he said, "for the pain I caused you, for leaving without a word, for all the times I made you doubt me. I regret it all." I told him that the past no longer mattered. What mattered was that we were still together. He nodded and said, "You saved me without even knowing it." The months passed quietly after that. My shop grew popular, and Dawson's students respected him deeply. We started to feel like part of the town. People smiled when they saw us together. I think they could see how much we loved each other. We were not perfect, but we were steady. Then, one winter morning, something changed. Dawson woke up early as usual, but he looked pale. He said he had a small headache and would stay home for the day. I made him tea and told him to rest. By afternoon, he said he felt better, so I went to the shop. When I came home in the evening, I found him asleep on the couch with a book on his chest. I smiled and covered him with a blanket. But the next day, he still looked tired. The same happened the next day, too. I told him we should visit a doctor, but he said it was nothing serious. Weeks went by, and his tiredness grew. Finally, one morning, I decided not to ask him. I simply called the doctor and made an appointment. At the hospital, the doctor looked at Dawson for a long time and then asked for some tests. I could see fear in Dawson's eyes, even though he tried to hide it. A few days later, the results came. He had a heart problem that needed careful treatment. The doctor said he had probably lived with it for years without knowing. I felt the room go silent. Dawson looked calm, but I could tell his mind was racing. He started his treatment soon after. The days at the hospital were long, and I stayed with him whenever I could. I brought him books, and sometimes we talked about our old life in London. He often smiled and said, "We have come a long way, haven't we?" I always smiled back, even when my heart felt heavy. The months that followed were difficult, but we learned to find beauty in small things again. I cooked his favorite food, and he read to me when I felt tired. Sometimes we sat near the window, watching the sea. He said the sound of the waves made him feel alive. He was still the same Dawson I had fallen in love with, quiet but full of feeling. One evening, near the end of winter, he looked at me and said, "If something happens to me, promise me one thing. Promise me you will not stop living." I told him not to talk like that, but he smiled softly. "I just want to know that you will keep going," he said. I promised him I would, though I hoped I would never need to keep that promise. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Dawson was gone. His heart had stopped in the early hours of the morning. The doctors said it was peaceful. I sat by his bed for a long time, holding his hand. It was warm at first, then cold. I could not cry right away. It was as if my heart refused to believe it. The funeral was small. His mother came, and we talked for a long time after. She said Dawson had found happiness with me and that she was grateful. I tried to smile, but my chest hurt. In the months after his death, I kept the shop open. It helped me to keep busy. People in the town were kind. They came to see me often, and many shared memories of Dawson. They said he had been a good teacher, patient and kind. Every story they told made me feel both proud and sad. Sometimes, when I closed the shop at night, I walked to the beach. The sea looked the same as it had when he was here. The waves came and went, steady and calm. I often sat there and spoke to him in my mind. I told him about my day, about the customers, about the little things. It made me feel close to him. One evening, I took out the small notebook he used to write in. Inside were short notes he had written for me. Some were just reminders like, buy milk or fix the light. But others were softer. One said, thank you for staying. Another said, you make the silence feel like home. I closed the book and smiled through tears. I realized that even though he was gone, his words would always stay with me. His regret had turned into love, and that love had changed both of us. He had taught me that real love is not about never making mistakes. It is about choosing each other again and again, even when things fall apart. Now, every morning, I open the shop and think of him walking down the street with his bag over his shoulder. I imagine his calm smile and his soft voice, saying he would see me in the evening. He regretted everything, but he also learned everything. And I will carry that lesson with me for the rest of my life. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share.